I'm back, baby, and today we're talking about a long-running game that you've probably heard of, and one that I have spent a fair amount of time with, both on the Xbox and on the PC. And the PC is where I've been spending my time with Halo Infinite. And to be totally honest, it's not living up to the hype. And today, I want to try to break down why. So stick around if you're into that. And but before we get into that, though, an apology is in order. It has taken me way too long to get my shit together and put out more videos, and for that, I am very, 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 very sorry. And I will try to do better in the future. I finally figured out how I want to actually start making these videos and what I really like and what I'm passionate about when it comes to making videos. So, yeah, thank you all for being very patient, and if you're new to watching this, I would like to welcome you to the channel. But anyway, let's get into it. And before I do get into it, I want to preface that I really do like this game. I really do. It's a blast to play, and it's even better with friends in multiplayer, but I'm making this because I feel like Halo Infinite does not meet the expectations, and I'm criticizing this because I have a love for video games and the interactive medium as a whole. So don't go into the comments or on Twitter with Moonbrain and think that I want this game removed from the face of the planet. I don't. I like it. It's very good. Now, without further ado, let's see. Where can I start with this? Okay. Halo Infinite is an alright game. Okay, look. Okay. This review is going to go through all of the major parts of the game, so if there is something here that I missed, then bite me. Alright, let's start with the campaign, since it and its gameplay are the best part of the whole game. Firstly, I want to say that the shooting in Halo Infinite is the best that it's ever been in the series. I love the feel of the OG trilogy, but hot damn is this leagues better. Basically, all of the weapons have a very satisfying punch to firing them and an impact when you land your shots, which might seem a little bit weird to call that out in shooters, but especially if you've played Battlefield in the recent years, and a lot of the more recent Call of Duties, like Advanced Warfare and Black Ops 3, a lot of the times it feels like your weapons are kind of just firing air some of the time, unless you kill them in one shot. But in Infinite, every weapon feels like it's doing a substantial amount of damage to whatever you're shooting at. And I say basically all of the weapons, looking at you. One of the big changes to the gameplay loop, though, and the combat is that every weapon runs on ammo and can be refilled. Now, this might seem weird to point out if you're just starting in the Halo series, which I don't really know why your first Halo game is the reboot after a trilogy and a half of games, but whatever. The only guns that run on ammo in the other Halo games were human weapons. Now, everything has refillable ammo. Most bullets are used in kinetic weapons. Most of the alien stuff uses plasma and shock ammo, and the Forerunner stuff uses hard light ammo. The step further here is now that power weapons have refillable ammo. Regular energy swords get more battery if you walk over an energy sword on the ground. The gravity hammer gets more gravity? The skewer makes sense because you just fire railroad spikes, so you just get to pick up another railroad spike. This isn't a huge change to the formula, but it helps the open world combat, in my opinion, especially since you can more easily manage a loadout, and you don't have to constantly be hunting down weapons, and you can keep your own playstyle more active in the game. I mean, you want to take 3 bases in a row with the same maul or an energy sword? Go for it. If you play your cards right, that won't be too difficult to do. Some of it is RNG, but for the most part, you can get it done pretty easily. And I honestly haven't seen very many people talk about it, but I think that it's a good change, especially in light of the biggest addition to the gameplay, the equipment. Halo Infinite is a good game because it has a grappling hook. Alright, now for the story. Okay, for real though, this shit is way too much fun. There is just so much stuff to grapple. You can bring weapons to you from racks, you can hit enemies and grapple to them, and then upgrade it to stun them in the process, then upgrade it even further to where you fly at them like Goku. You can grab 4 different types of explosive barrels that are everywhere. You can grab a barrel and use it to start a chain reaction of other explosive barrels, or you can use the grapple for mobility, like in Titanfall, to bring yourself to a roof, to flank the annoying-ass jackal snipers, or to use it to run away from a charging brute. There's so many possibilities for just that one piece of equipment, which, for me and many other people, it's the only piece of equipment that people seem to use, which is fine, but I think that it would have been nice to see the other items have more versatility and more use than specific boss fights or just specific areas if you're having trouble. Like, for instance, the scan dart. is really only used in an early boss fight against an elite with cloaking. The drop wall most of the time isn't worth it because it's too small whenever you first get it, and it gets damaged if you try to shoot through it. It's not a Winston barrier, so it doesn't really work most of the time unless you're in a pinch and you just desperately need to charge your shields. You don't really need the thruster kit because the grappling hook is just the thruster kit, but it can make you go up so you're harder to hit, so I don't really understand why you would want to use that a whole lot. I mean, the enemy's charging at you, grapple up or to the side. Are they far away? Hit the ground or the enemy to close the gap. The grappling hook is really intuitive, but it's kind of the only one that you're going to use. Even if all of the gear isn't as in-depth as I would like it to be, it's still pretty cool finding them in the story, which is, actually now it's probably a good idea to get into that. It sure does its job. Okay, that's overly negative. The campaign starts off pretty strong and stays engaging for a while, and I gotta say, this is my favorite version of Master Chief in the whole series. Halo Infinite made Master Chief a true character rather than just a glorified everyman.
It's locked down. Requires a hack.
Okay. And you can do that?
No.
In the older games, Master Chief was just a guy in a helmet that you controlled. He was kind of like Boba Fett, where he was really cool. Part of it was that you didn't see his face, but also part of it was that you, the player, controlled everything that he did. And so, in turn, you made Master Chief awesome. But you didn't know anything about Master Chief. You knew he was a Spartan. You knew that he was very, very good with guns and was very good at genocide. And that's about it. So I, for one, actually kind of liked it whenever Halo 4 and 5 started fleshing Chief out. I didn't like how they were doing it, but I liked the idea of giving Master Chief more of a character. As butchered as Halo 5 was, I thought that it was at least something of an interesting idea. And Infinite takes it a step further. It's really nice having the player embody a character that actually has a struggle and an arc in a Halo game. That's pretty cool. That's why Halo Reach and Halo ODST are so loved. Your character and the characters around them go through some sort of arc. There's emotion and weight and stakes to the story in a first-person shooter, and that's honestly pretty rare. Finding the dead Spartans is the best example that I can come up with, and it's really cool seeing how Chief reacts to the death of his fellow soldiers. In this story, basically all of humanity's AIs have revolted, and Cortana's guardians are implied to have destroyed a multitude of planets. The Banished invaded and completely destroyed the UNSC Infinity, and he got his ass kicked by Atriox. Chief blames himself for this entire situation. It's really neat seeing the badass super soldier Master Chief have actual conflict that's not shooting a gun. So, obviously, I like everything that's going on with Master Chief in this game. Him and Octane and the weapon are pretty cool together. The thing that bugs me about the story is basically everything else. I won't lie, it's commendable that 343 is trying to keep the narrative going from Halo 5, but the setup for Infinite Story is really dumb. It feels like 343 just didn't know how to continue from the end of Halo 5 and wanted the player to ignore the entire story of Halo 5. And for that matter, most of Halo 4. Part of what bugs me about Halo Infinite's story is how they continue the story from 5. In this game, it's shown that most of humanity's AIs, or things that run the entire military, rebelled against humanity and decided to side with Cortana, which hurt humanity and presumably crippled the entirety of the UNSC. Pretty cool idea, right? Guess what? Off screen. Cortana has an army of guardians that she can use to destroy planets on a whim, which is explained in less than 30 seconds in game, mind you. Destroys the brute homeworld off screen, and somehow Cortana came in contact with Atriox, the leader of the Banished, who, by the way, you don't even know about unless you played the spin-off real-time strategy game of Halo, off screen, and then gets deleted off screen. The main villain of the last game and a major threat gets deleted off screen. Palpatine in episode 9. That's not even the worst part. Let's talk about bosses. Different levels, quote unquote, end in a boss fight, and most of the time it's just a brute with a bigger health bar and a brute that does more damage. At some point early in the campaign, a brand new alien called the Harbinger gets introduced and throws Chief through a tree. Fast forward to the end of the story, you beat the last brute. That would have been a very, very fitting end for the story. Get some somber music in there, a good monologue or two, and you have, in my opinion, a great ending and a nice setup for more DLC featuring the Harbinger. But you couldn't leave well enough alone. Instead, we have another hour of hallways and rooms copy-pasted from Halo 2. And guess what that ends with? Some grand final gauntlet? Some big dramatic payoff? No. Remember the alien lady who threw you at a tree? Remember how that's the only thing that she has done this entire game, and that is the only thing the player knows about her or her entire race? That's the final boss fight. Years of development, years of hype, 3 different gameplay directors, and that's the final boss. A game that starts off stronger than any game in the past 8 years ends with all the impact of a wet fart. Not even a shart. Just a fart. Fucking hell, man. Why? What happened? Where was the disconnect? It started really fun. It was so solid. It had the music. It had fucking Cortana as a waifu. What happened? I'm good with excusing a little bit of how we got here at the start of the game because of general setup. That happens in games and in TV shows and in movies all the time. They did that at the start of Halo 5 with Blue Team and Fireteam Osiris. Nobody knows anything about these characters unless you've delved deep into the lore and read the fucking comics and watched Halo Waypoint. But when your setup of your new game is the conclusion of major plot points from previous games, you need to explain that shit. Yes, fucking not. You remember that line about the Banished and about how they were the villains in a spin-off real-time strategy game? I found that out while I was writing this script. I finished Halo Infinite and didn't know where the Banished came from. I get that it's fan service. I get that it works for people who played Halo Wars, but if you didn't play Halo Wars, it's just gonna hurt the experience because you're just gonna know nothing about who these characters are and how you're supposed to get invested in them. The first Halo didn't have the characters get invested. The Covenant were just the aliens that were trying to kill you. Here's an assault rifle. Go. Then in Halo 2, they expanded on it. You learn more about the Covenant, about what kind of society they were. Then you played as the Covenant, which pissed a lot of people off. Then in Halo 3, you work with the Covenant because the Flood is a bigger threat. I get that. Makes sense. This isn't how you do it. A good example is Darth Maul. If you've only seen episodes 1 through 9 and then decide to go watch Solo, then you're going to be very confused when Darth Maul shows up all of a sudden. But if you watched all of the stuff, if you watched Clone Wars, if you watched Star Wars Rebels, then it makes sense. You understand the crime syndicate. You understand. But if you didn't, you see how confusing that is? If you only played the Halo games, then you're not going to know anything about what happened to the UNSC, or what happened to the Banished, or where they came from, or who they are. And that sucks. But the Madmen had the audacity to tease a sequel with what should have been in the game from the start. Okay, spoiler alert, so put it on mute if you don't want to hear it. But Atriox is alive, and that's the teaser. The villain that has been hyped up for the entire campaign. The guy that kicked your ass at the very, very start of the game. In the first cutscene that has seemingly inspired thousands of beings was just fucking around on the ring while we were kicking ass and taking names. Why is he not who we are fighting? Forget the romance between Cortana and Chief. Forget the Harbinger. Make Atriox the foil to Chief. Make Atriox the one that has the crisis about honor and dying in the heat of battle. Make Atriox Chief but more aggressive. And let Master Chief be the one to have the comeback. Then make the Harbinger the big reveal at the end to set up the big bad for the next games. Okay. I realized that I just ranted about what I think is bad in this game for a while now. But let me be frank. This game has all of those problems, but is also great. The movement and combat have the perfect speed to get the super soldier one-man army feeling. You know, the whole feel like Spider-Man? This makes you feel like a Spartan. The enemies act like they did in the old Halo games, and now the player has more movement options to speed things up. The wealth of things that can be done with the grappling hook is just one example of the effort that went into making this one of the best feeling games in years. And seeing what else has come out from the two biggest contenders, COD is mediocre at best and Battlefield is a disaster, it's really refreshing to see a game with all of this effort pay off in some way. Even in the multiplayer, granted the microtransactions are annoying and the MP was fuck at launch, but it's a free-to-play multiplayer, and the XP got a huge fix in like a week after launch, so 343 obviously cares about it. And look, I don't hate Halo Infinite, it just frustrates me how close this game could have been to greatness, how close it could have been to redefining the series and redefining first-person shooters as a whole. Is it worth your time? Well, that's for you to decide. If you want a solid open-world game that's set in the Halo universe with really, really good combat and some pretty great character work, then sure, you'll probably like it. But if you're looking for a Halo game with all of that and story to go with the years of development and the years of hype and the new console generation to boot, I don't think this is it. I'd wait for a sale to get the campaign and sink some time into the multiplayer if you are really just dying for that Halo experience. This is a great game, but the way I see it, the boys and girls at 343 flew a little too close to the sun on this one. Maybe they should have called it Halo Icarus.